Now, what happened was this. The Senate passed the relevant law to ensure that that particular provision would be removed. In other words, those that wanted that provision that promoted child marriage and gave children that were married to older men the right to renounce their citizenship, they had that removed. They actually passed a vote, did the first vote, and it was agreed that it would be removed. Immediately after that, Senator Ahmed Sani, who was the governor of Zamfara State and who is a practicing paedophile. I say this because he's married to a 12-year-old, and that's the definition of pedophilia. So he's a practicing paedophile. He got up and raised objections to this, saying that it would affect the right of those that believe in child marriage to marry young girls, and it would affect the right of those young girls to renounce their citizenship. Therefore, he wanted the matter revisited. Now, very curiously, because this does not happen normally, the Senate decided, as a consequence of his objections, to revisit the issue and have a second ballot, and have a second vote on the issue. But when they went to the second round for a second vote, a second ballot, unfortunately they couldn't achieve it. They got less than 77, simply because Ahmed Yarima had lobbied so many people and those that shared his view about pedophilia and child marriage and child sex and child rape. And he managed to win the support of enough senators. And as a consequence of that, the provision could not be deleted from the relevant law, and the provision now stayed within there. What disturbs me is the silence of the Nigerian people, the silence of the majority of senators, and the collusion of the minority of senators that supported him. And I think that's very unfortunate. I would also use the word that those that supported him behaved in a reprehensible manner.
From what the analogy you have given, what is the consequence of this action to the Nigerian state?
Well, the consequences are so many, and they are so many. First of all, the consequence for the child, for the girl child, is that it has reiterated and confirmed the position that in a number of states in our country, a child as young as 6 or 12 or 9 or whatever, can be married and she can be bedded. Pedophilia has been legitimized and supported. There is no country in the world that practices this, that legitimizes it, apart from Saudi Arabia and Iran. No other country in the world. So when those that say that this is a matter of faith for them, and they seek to justify pedophilia, child rape, child marriage, and so on and so forth, by their religious faith, the question that needs to be put to them is this, that are you saying that the 90 or 95% of Muslims on this planet, that by law, specifically do not practice this, and have rejected it and have said it's un-Islamic and unacceptable, are you saying that they're not good Muslims? Are you saying that the Yoruba Muslims in Nigeria, who do not practice this and who have rejected it, are you saying they're not good Muslims? Years ago, these were cultural issues. But of course, we dropped those negative things and we stopped doing them long ago. So the cultural argument doesn't work. The religious argument doesn't work. So on what basis are people insisting on doing this? And it's only in Nigeria that people will get up and try to defend this. And you asked about the consequences. Let me tell you what some of the consequences are. First of all, there's a terrible disease that's associated with it, and I'll go into detail about this. Okay, the first thing is this, that most of these children that you pick up at the age of 6 or 9 or 12 and you have sex with, you marry and you have sex with, they end up having a terrible disease called vagina fistula. It's a terrible disease, and what it basically is that it affects their private part, because they're just too small to be doing these things. It affects their private part. It destroys it completely, destroys their womb, and it makes them incontinent. What that means is they will keep going to the toilet. They will wee themselves. They will do the other thing as well, without having any control over it. And this thing just starts happening. After a while, it affects virtually, I wouldn't say all, but I'd say at least 70% of them. Okay, and it destroys their lives completely because there is no cure for it. Okay, that means you have destroyed that child's life. Okay, and the worst aspect of it is that after this begins to happen, what usually happens is the husband or so-called husband, person I would term as a child rapist, not a husband, will now drop the child, keep her somewhere, and find another child and marry that other child too. So what is happening is that you are actually destroying the lives of these children, using them for a year or two, disabling them, causing them to be urinating themselves, poo-pooing themselves, and so on and so forth. Then the smell and all these things that are associated with it. Because you can't stand it, you shove them aside, you pick up another child, and you do the same thing. And somebody will try to defend that by their religion, by their culture. And we, in 21st century Nigeria, in 2013, will say it's acceptable? No. It is completely unacceptable. Let me tell you something that will shock you. In the world today, this disease is rampant. But let me tell you something. 47% of cases of this terrible disease called vagina fistula are in Nigeria. That means, let's say 50%. Let's add 3%. Okay? These are not my figures. Almost 50% of the cases of this terrible disease, this self-inflicted disease that we allow our men to inflict on our children in this country, half of those things that are going on in the world, half of the cases of this terrible disease going on in the world today are in Nigeria. And how can that be defended anyway? How can we as Nigerians accept such a thing? That we are causing our children to go through this terrible thing. And that is only to talk about the physical trauma and the destruction and the illnesses associated with it. What about the psychological one? You have a child, 6 years old. We all have children. 9 years old, 12 years old, anything below the age of 18, is forced into marriage, taken into a man's house. The day after, the night of the wedding, the groom, the old man, probably with the old man, let me not say with any beard or anything, the old man will now go into his bride. He will enter the room, enter the chamber. He will get on top of this woman, this young girl. And he will force himself into her, even though she can hardly take it. And he will have his way. And he will rupture her. He will tear her private part. There will be blood everywhere, sweat everywhere, screams everywhere. The girl will cry and wail and accept it. Visualize this. Think about it as a human being. This is a human being, this child. Tears, the blood, the smell, the wailing, the crying. Until the man finishes, he has his way. He leaves the room. And he comes back maybe 2 hours later to do the same thing again to this poor child. And he does that every day and every night for the next 6 months, for the next 1 year, until the girl has vagina fistula, starts stooling herself, starts wee-weeing herself. When they go out, she's wee-weeing, she's stooling, she can't control herself. She ends up wearing Pampers. She's smelling everywhere she goes. And then you now put her in some room. And you send her away. And you bring another 6-year-old, another 9-year-old, another 12-year-old, another 15-year-old. And you do the same to this child. Any man that can indulge in such wickedness is not a man. And any people that can see that sort of thing happening to their own children, any nation that can see that and turn a blind eye to it and say it's acceptable for any reason, or even say, well, it's not our business. After all, it's not our children it's affecting. That is sheer wickedness as well. We must not just condemn those that do these things. We must condemn those that remain silent when these things are being done. Millions of children's lives are being destroyed. I mentioned 47% earlier, okay, of cases of vagina fistula on the planet being in Nigeria. What I didn't tell you was that the 47% are actually situated in northern Nigeria. I'll also tell you this. When the vote took place in the Senate the other day on this issue, every single vote that supported Yerima on the Senate floor, apart from two, a misguided senator from Ondo State, I won't mention his name, because I have so much respect for the governor of Ondo State. Segun Mimiko is my good friend. So I won't mention the senator's name. This had nothing to do with Mimiko, but it was one of his senators. Okay? This man, this Yoruba man, was the only southerner, apart from one other equally misguided senator from Edo State. Again, I won't mention his name, out of respect to Adams Oshimole, who is a good friend of mine and who is a wonderful person. These were the only two Southerners. Every other vote on the floor of the Senate that day that supported Yerima was a Northern vote. And 47% of vagina fistula on the planet is in Nigeria, and they're all situated in the north, according to what I really do think that we need to start talking about this. Now, a lot of people feel we shouldn't even talk about it. I do not accept that. Anything that affects the health, the livelihood, the welfare, and the future of a Nigerian child, I think we need to talk about. And my challenge is this: to all the women that are in power and in authority in this country, what are you doing about this? All the men that turn a blind eye to it, why are you being silent? Bertrand Russell said something, that the hottest place in hell is reserved for those who remain silent in the face of injustice and wickedness. Can there be a greater injustice than this? Children are meant to be protected. Children are meant to be looked after and cared for. We're not meant to bed them. We're not meant to marry them. We're not meant to have sex with them. We're not meant to destroy their future. We are meant to protect them and look after them. And I am calling on every Nigerian to rise up to the occasion and begin to try to fight this evil that is in our land.
What will you think is responsible for this? Will we say poverty? Will we say economy? Because from what the analysis and the statistics you give.
No, this has absolutely nothing to do with poverty, the economy. There are no excuses for
ignorance.
Depraved behavior has no excuse. This is depraved behavior. What it is that, in my own view, what I believe is going on is this, that we just have a disproportionate number of pedophiles in our country. There are many people in this country who just want to take advantage of the fact that in some parts of our country, that they can get away with child rape, and child sex, and child marriage. And they don't care about the consequences of it. Most of the guys that do these things are not poor people. Actually, they're very wealthy people. What is wrong is wrong. I mean, if you say there's a cultural reason or religious reason to commit murder, to kill, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in stopping. Murder is wrong. Child sex is wrong. Child marriage is wrong. It is wrong by any standard. And it's totally and completely unacceptable in any civilized society. And again, it's not only in Nigeria this happens, and we need to be very clear about what's going on here. The difference with Nigeria is that in many parts of Nigeria, it has been legitimized, it has been accepted, it has been condoned, and people do it with impunity and say it's their right to do this. And then afterwards they're killed. This is what has been happening. It's been happening for years. It's been happening for hundreds of years, and it's still happening today. It's just they don't talk about it too much because it is wrong, it is illegal, and it is shameful. And understand what's going on here. We spoke about the physical, the trauma, like I said earlier. And so, can you imagine a trauma that a child will go through, having been through that? It must be an extraordinarily terrible thing for them. So these are basically the fundamental issues. Many people believe that pedophilia, and by the way, I've read a number of books about this, because, I made a point of researching the stuff, and that's why I've written so many essays about it, and the essays have been published in virtually every major newspaper in the country. In many countries, pedophiles have a very hard time, even in prison, when they're caught. They usually keep them apart from other prisoners, because they may kill them or wound them or maim them or whatever. But there's a lot more to it. It's not just about lusting after children, though that is part of it. I mean, you do have men and women, by the way, who are predators, who are child predators, who see a child. Like Yerima is a predator. He sees a child, and he just cannot control his lusts. He becomes aroused, and all he's thinking about is bedding that child. Now, it's a sickness, okay? That is one. But there's a much deeper aspect to it, which for me is much more frightful than that. You can understand that, and you can deal with that. You can fight that. But there's a lot more to it. You have become the child's master. You've become the dominator. You've become the slave master who has the power to inflict pain. You can do anything you want. You can kill the child. You can sodomize the child. You can have sex with the child. You can do anything you want with that child because you have total power over that child. Now, those that do these things believe in such things, and that's what you're going to deal with. You may say, I don't believe such things. That's not the issue. Those that do it believe it, and whether it's true or not, only God knows. But they do it for that purpose. So it's not just about lust. It's not just about sex. It's not just about dominating. It's not just about having slaves that you can do anything you want to, even kill if you like. It's not just about that. It's also about spiritually drawing the strength, the power, the virtue, the blessings, the aura, the goodness from that pure child and taking it from yourself and imparting it to others. So there's also that aspect. And there are many people that actually believe in this. And that's what we got to deal with. So the answer is this. This practice must be completely outlawed. You cannot justify it on religious grounds. You cannot say because you're a Muslim and because it was practiced many, many years ago that it can be practiced today. Like I said earlier, even in Christian Europe and in the Middle East, child marriage was something that was practiced even before Europe. In the Middle East, throughout the world, child marriage was practiced. So was human sacrifice. So was the killing of twins. So was slavery and so many other things, reprehensible things. But that is in the distant past. It's not for today. Societies are meant to evolve. They're meant to develop. They're meant to be advanced. You do not apply a 6th century standard to the 21st century for any reason. If it's a cultural issue, again, all our cultural practices that are reprehensible to any right-thinking person ought to be dropped. So what am I saying? This practice of child marriage cannot be defended. It must be dropped. It must be rejected. And I call on every Nigerian, every woman, every man in our society to rise up and say no to it.
Thank you very much.